There we go. Hey, everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and my guest today is Dr. Doug Lisle. Why is he here on Monday? Well, usually he's the first Tuesday of the month. He does a regular show called Straight Talk with Dr. Doug Lisle. He had a bit of laryngitis, and so he's coming on this week instead. And today he's going to be talking about a topic that I've been talking a lot about, which is dietary perfection. And he's going to tell us how can we get a low A in health. Please welcome Dr. Doug Lisle. Hello, Dr. Lisle.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. We miss you when you don't come on. So you're a very popular guest.
All good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm actually still getting over something, but hopefully I'll be able to get through.
if you need to stop, you stop. You sound okay right now.
Yeah.
And this topic, you have given actually, I believe at the McDougall Advanced Study Weekends PowerPoints about this. I think one was called The Continuum of Evil, one was called Dare to Be Lousy. Aren't
Yeah,
those very similar types of conversations about this topic?
totally. The yeah, one thing you notice in this space is that the not too many people in the world are really particularly interested in health and health decisions. They get interested if they get real sick, but even then they tend to not be very curious or interested. So it's a small percentage of people that actually have any legitimate focus about health. Far more people are interested in, for example, how to lose weight or how to build muscle. Then you got all kinds of people thinking that they've learned all kinds of things about nutrition, etc. But when it comes to actually studying the nature of health and disease and the causes of health problems, etc., and then discovering that dietary factors are, a dominant feature of this, very few people are interested. So it's going to turn out that the people that get interested in this are the space where, I've lived a lot of my professional life. And it's going to turn out that in that space, guess what we've got is we've got a bunch of hyper-conscientious nutcases that are extremely interested. They're not just interested, they're already freakazoids anyway for being in the space in the first place. And so then once they're in that space, the natural sort of free market processes will churn basically the discussions that are going to be around. And so there's been a variety of perspectives over the last 50 years that have been, basically pushed forth. But one of the perspectives that gets pushed forth and gets a fair amount of attention is essentially what we might call fine details. So there's quite a bit of discussion over fine details, how many nutrients of various kinds there are in different kinds of foods, and how we ought to be all really interested in this. And then we have also fine details about ultimately it culminates, I don't know, in 10 or 15 years ago with a thing called SOS free. Okay, so I don't know who started that. I think it might have been Alan Goldhammer. He might have been the first individual. He's certainly the first individual that I ever heard espouse such a thing. But that had been a prescription out of the natural hygiene lore, back, since the 1930s. Had been essentially they hadn't called it SOS free, but they'd certainly said no sugar, no oil, no salt. The McDougall program had basically been a no oil program, but had not considered modest amounts of salt or sugar to be anything of any serious concern. And so therefore, now we've got a purity difference of philosophy on these details. Now, so through all this, when Alan and I sit down and plot out the pleasure trap basically mm, was far more based philosophically than it was empirically. In other words, so we were certainly aware of scientific evidence, we're pretty aware about these things. And so we knew what direction the right direction to go was. And so and that hasn't changed any. In other words, we know the right direction to go. The question would be also, you know, okay, if you know the right direction to go, what would be a question is a question is what would then be the optimal prescription? And it's like, okay, well, in principle, we may know what the optimal prescription is, i.e., a completely natural, unprocessed, whole natural foods diet with no sugar, no oil, no salt added. Possible. That is a theoretical possibility that's where it would be. We would understand that in principle, it would have to get much finer grain than that. In other words, once we got smart enough to know about individual differences in genetics, it starts to be now it starts to be, well, an individual dietary program for every individual on Earth. How much rhubarb versus how many raspberries versus how much kale. It's like, okay, well, you can get down to, is it possible or even legitimate to consider individual differences at that level? Well, that's where you run into the empirical constraints. In other words, there's no evidence to suggest that any of that is defensible. And so I could see that argument, the arguments of basically an infinite amount of attention to an infinite amount of detail, getting to the point where it's not just a law of diminishing returns, it's a law of utter clarity. We don't even know if it's true. So on the other side of such a sort of a theoretical spin, yeah, John McDougall saying, "Hey, all you got to do is eat just potatoes for God's sakes. If just eat potatoes, you're going to be just fine." And so, i.e., the ultimate simplistic thing. Um, so now, um, from a philosophical point of view, that I finally arrive at is I arrive at the concept of balance. So the concept of balance is that yes, we would need to be concerned about the nutrients in, obviously, but we also are concerned about the nutrients that have to be pushed out. In other words, the innate toxicity of the food. And so we would understand that there's some theoretical balance about what someone would be eating, and that if things get out of balance in some way, that could be theoretically suboptimal, but we don't know how much, and we don't know what the thresholds are. So this is all gets very, very theoretical. So at some point, I decided to dispatch with the theory. Okay. And so what I did was I actually went into the national database of the CDC, and I spent a long time in the national database studying what kills people and when do they die. Okay, so I actually looked at obviously the United States statistics on mortality, and I learned quite a bit in my musings through this. And then I also looked at worldwide evidence. So I looked at from people's population databases from all over the world and seeing when people die. And something starts to dawn on you in case you weren't aware of it. And that is that the human being has a lifespan, just like any animal has a lifespan. And that lifespan is genetically determined. And that all that you can possibly do with respect to a lifespan is you can shorten it. You can't lengthen it. Okay. So this is a very important principle. So the principle is that in the process of living, there is damage being done to the genetic code as the genes basically replace your cells. They have to go through a very complicated process of basically making a reproduction or a replication of themselves. And as they do that process over and over and over and over again, they can only do it with a certain degree of precision. And so it's basically like a Xerox machine. So if you take a Xerox and then you take a Xerox of the Xerox and then you take a Xerox of the Xerox of the Xerox and then you take a Xerox of the Xerox of the Xerox of the Xerox, any of us that have ever done such a thing know that by the time you do it 10 times, the 10th version is starting to look a little shoddy relative to the first version. And so that's how we all look. Like, sorry to tell you, AJ, you and I are peers in terms of our ages, okay? And we have gone through some Xeroxing, okay? And it's like we're still here, we're still happy, and we're in good shape, and we enjoy our existence. But we are not as I'll look at pictures of myself from my 50s, and I'm like, God, I was a child, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? I can see a substantial difference of what has taken place. And it's like, well, I might as well enjoy the current process because I know what's coming. 10 years from now, I'm going to be looking back over my shoulder if I'm still here thinking, man, what was I bitching about or complaining about in my 60s? I was looking pretty good in my 60s. But the truth is that we're a Xerox of a Xerox. And that process can only be done so pristinely. You can only put, so good a toner in it. You can only clean the glass so carefully. You can only manage the electronic variance in the surge of the electricity into the machine. You can only control it so well, and you only get so good of a Xerox out of it. And the Xerox will not depend actually very much on the food that you eat or anything else that you do or your sleep. It's basically under control of the genetic code and, in fact, the amount of random variation and background radiation that is nature to life. So, i.e., 80 plus or minus 10. So, more or less, the vast majority of human beings, if they don't die of a pathological process that comes and gets them, they're more or less destined to live around 80 years, maybe 70, maybe 90, but pretty much this is the nature of life. All right. So I looked at that and I looked at all kinds of things and I looked at all the things that people died of and I looked at what could be done to actually reduce the statistical odds of those things. And we're going to find out that you can reduce you basically, the correct way to look at this is that you can't reduce your odds of having these things happen. You can, there are a certain statistical likelihood you can make it worse. Okay. So you can make it worse that you're going to have some vascular problems if you smoke cigarettes. You can make it worse that you're going to have a vascular crisis if you eat a bunch of animal food and fried crap. Okay. Can you eliminate these things? No, you cannot eliminate these things. In other words, the background threats that you have are innate to your biology and innate to the processes of living as a living thing. Okay. So I looked at all this and I realized that we could do things that could hasten our problems but we couldn't do anything to stop the statistical possibilities. In other words, those are innate to life itself. And so I looked at that thing and I said, okay, how big are the effects? Just how much damage can you do? And the answer is, well, you can do quite a bit of damage. So the biggest damaging thing that you can do is you can kind of take about 10% of the lifespan off of a human if you start smoking cigarettes when you're about 14. Okay. If you do that your whole lifetime, you'll take about 10% of the lifespan, 10 to 12% of the lifespan will be forfeited. It's like in all probability. Some people will forfeit more, some people will forfeit less. Okay, so, but the average statistical pressure or damage that is done to a human being by smoking cigarettes is somewhere around 8 to 10 years of life. Okay. So if you only smoke half your life, you're probably going to cost you 5 years. If you smoke your whole damn life from the time you're about 17, then it's probably going to be 10. If you only smoke, a third of a pack of cigarettes a day, it's probably going to be a third of the effect. It's probably going to be 3 years. Okay. So more or less, we can look at that and basically say, okay, you're doing something that is going to shorten your existence. You know, it's going to, if you smoke cigarettes and it's going to cost you 10 years, that's pretty close to what I would call an F. Oops, that's an F. You know what I mean? So if you sort of deliberately self-destruct and take yourself, take 10 years off your existence, I don't know what else we would call that. Okay, so now if you eat a bunch of fried chicken and you don't smoke, you eat a bunch of fried chicken and a bunch of chocolate shakes and French fries and you just, corn dogs. In other words, yeah, Cocoa Puffs. In other words, you just do it about as stupid as you could possibly do it. That's about 3.5 years. Okay. So that's about a three year and 6 month penalty. It's like, okay, Well, what would we call that? Well, it's not an F, for God's sakes. We've already sort of said that about as bad as you can possibly pull it off is a 10-year penalty. So, about the second worst thing that you could probably do is just be egregiously self-indulgent in the dietary arena, at which point that's going to be what it is. Well, what would you call that? Well, I don't know. I'd kind of call that a D. Okay, so that's mediocre relative to what it is that you could do. Okay, well, what if you do it halfway? What if you are, what if you do actually a quite a bit better job than the average self-indulgent slob? Okay. And so you actually eat, I don't know, you eat, a salad twice a week at a salad bar, and you actually have some baked potatoes with a little bit of butter on them, and oh, I don't know. I don't know what else you do. Oh, you have oatmeal in the morning. Okay, let's say that that's what you do. Like every morning, you have oatmeal in the morning. Yeah, you still eat grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, but by God, you have an apple a day and you eat an oatmeal in the morning. What's that? Well, that's going to be a substantial mitigating force on what it is that we're going to see. Okay, so we're no longer going to be three years and 6 months. We're probably going to be down to, I don't know, 2 years, 2.5 years. In other words, now we're closing in on that we clawed back all except probably the last couple of years of what was in the cards ideally for you in the first place. Okay. So it's like, oh wow, is that really what the numbers are? It's like, yeah, that's what the numbers are. So suddenly now when I'm staring at this evidence, I'm looking really hard at it. I'm realizing, okay,
If you do
now
those attacks out.
I'm sorry, Dr. Lisle, something just keeps coming on my phone.
that's okay. No worries.
Yeah.
Now we start thinking, okay, well, if a so-so half-baked, somewhat health conscious, i.e., oatmeal 5 mornings a week, and then I do bacon and eggs at Denny's on the weekends. But for 5 mornings a week, I do oatmeal, and then I have an apple a day, etc. So I do some things that are half, and I have some vegetables on my plate at night along with my pork chops. Okay. So it's like, oh, okay. Now we're down to a couple of years statistical cost. Okay, so keep in mind that that's sort of your 1960s household. Okay, this is kind of like we're not trying to eat trash with both hands. Mom is actually cooking some stuff at night. There's actually cans of vegetables and green beans and applesauce that are served at. It's like, wow, there's some actual vegetable material here. Um, and now we've got a price that's paid a couple of years. Now, what's that look like? Oh, I don't know. Now we're sort of in the C range. Okay, so it's like let's look at this. We're not flunking out. We're not being grossly irresponsible, and we're getting probably 97% of the lifespan that's possible for the organism statistically. Okay. All right. So this is what I discover in actually pouring through the evidence carefully myself, looking at worldwide evidence, sort of looking at the human condition. So when I looked at that and I stared at that in the face and I looked at it very hard at the evidence, trying to figure out whether it was worth, basically being an A+ student. I'm trying to figure this out. This is 2006. This is post the publication of the China study, which I'm now, I was one of the original editors of the China study. Now I'm going back through that, looking at every assumption. So I spent a period probably 2006, 2007, 2008, really grinding through this evidence pretty carefully in big national databases. So I'm looking at that. Why? Well, I was like my late 40s. And as in my late 40s, I was realizing, gosh, there's a moment when you realize, God, I'm not getting any younger. Like, wait a minute, this is starting to get real now. Out over the horizon, the horrible specter of turning 50 was sort of staring me in the face. I was no longer a young person. And so you're looking at that and you're like, okay, well, I knew quite well that I was a good eater, but I wasn't at the level of an Allen. Okay. So in other words, I was not an SOS free. That term hadn't been invented, but the concept was there, and I was not an SOS free living human. And I ate intelligently, but I had eyeballed what I thought was reasonable, but then I wasn't sure that I could defend it by looking at the empirical evidence. So by looking at the empirical evidence, I started to realize this emperor doesn't have any clothes. Okay, so now we're going to start looking at this very carefully. We're going to find out that there's nowhere is there any justification for I can see the justification for not being a D student or an F student, and I can see the justification clearly that I don't want to be average. The average person ultimately will die if you're a Doug, you're going to die of vascular disease at about 82. It's exactly where my dad died. It's exactly where Frank Sinatra died. It's, one after the next winds up around there. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I don't want that unless the quirks of fate take me there. I sure as heck wouldn't want to be self-inflicted the way both my dad and Frank Sinatra self-inflicted themselves. So so I want to be above that. What are my odds? Well, you look at those odds, and the odds are going to tell you, well, you should be able to dance your way around that vascular disease, a la Caldwell-Esselstyn. And if you do that, then you're going to wind up having some natural deaths from some other cause at about 85 and a half. It's like, oh, okay, there's 3.5 years in there, maybe. Okay. But most of that is going to be vascular disease, which is very, very easily, essentially, major vascular disease. You could have some quirky thing that could take you out. But major predictable vascular disease is like a freight train. You can't help seeing it coming. It's very, very easy to see. You can see it from miles away. I saw my dad's coming for decades. He was having chest pain when he was 52, for God's sakes, and continuing to chow down Texas brisket, and basically in defiance of Alan and I, and basically like, yeah, we're a couple of kids, we don't know anything. Well, we did know something. The We knew plenty, and I know plenty enough to know that I'm not courting any big time vascular disease myself. There's no way in hell. Okay, the so I'm not going to truncate my existence by doing something that is self-destructive. But there's a big difference between making sure I'm not being self-destructive and thinking that I'm doing something spectacular, which will somehow make my life live indefinitely. Now, this is the kind of fantasy psychosis that I've heard inside this arena. The So if you look up, for example, oh, let's exercise really hard, keep your heart really strong. That's what's going to count in your old age is your fitness and all this kind of stuff. It's like, nah, this is all BS. It's completely untrue. What counts is whether or not you have any pathology. Do you have a pathology that you self-inflicted on yourself? It has nothing to do whether you're running 3 miles a day when you're 84. That isn't going to make a damn bit of difference in your life expectancy, not a single day. Okay. So what counts is, are you making sure you are not generating pathology? That's the entire story here. Okay. It is not whether or not you have managed to take every tiny bit of pressure off of every organ system or push organ systems hard, like the vascular system, as hard as you can so that it lasts as long as possible. No way. The people that basically do almost no exercise at all, those people live just as long as the sons of the bitches that are out there trying to run marathons when they're 80. There's no difference in life expectancy. Okay. So what counts is, did any of those individuals create through their fork, whether they ran marathons or not, did they create a pathology as a result of what they ate or what they smoked? Okay. If they did, then that person's going to die sooner than the lazy dude who just sits and watches other people run around the track but eats a good vegan diet. That person's not going to create a vascular pathology, and that will outlive the fanatic who's a paleo dude who's running like crazy and trying to keep himself in spectacular condition. Big, big fat zero with respect to any data to support it. So I look at this whole thing and it's like, okay, my job is to just not do things that are systematically so problematic that they create pathology. That's a big different ticket than a ticket that is basically saying, I'm going to do everything possible to take every tiny bit of pressure off of this organism so that it, basically can be as pristine for as long as it possibly can be pristine. It's like, no, the background noise and the damage that's being done is being done by life itself. It's being done by the nature of radiation, the background radiation that you live in. People will hear this and they'll be like, oh my God, can't I put myself in Evian water and in a pyramid, like Michael Jackson, and then somehow not have it? It's like, no, you can't. This radiation that will come through you and contribute to your aging process, that this is native to the nature of your biology. There's exactly zero way to stop it. Now, believe me, we've got some multi-gazillionaire freakazoids out there running around the planet now hoping to cheat life. They do. God knows they're going to try to implant their brains into a silicon chip and then put that, like God knows. I mean, this is all these transhuman wackadoodles that meet in Davos. Okay, so this is not reality. Bill Gates, with for all of his money and hope, that looks like a pudgy 78-year-old guy that's not going to live too much longer. That's who he is because that's how he lived. Okay, so there's going to be no cheating that. And there's no cheating it through eating, the daily dozen that's going to somehow put a magical configuration of hypernutrient nutrients in you that somehow optimizes your quote health equation, that somehow you get more nutrients per cubic centimeter. None of that is 100% worthless. Okay. The only thing that matters is, are you doing something systematically egregious enough to any of those systems, i.e., your liver, your kidneys, your heart, your general vascular system, your immune system? Are you doing something that is egregiously shitty, that is actually causing systematic damage, and that will then truncate your existence as a result of the specific damage to that specific system? That is what there is on the table. My job is to see to it that I don't do that. Okay, so you won't see me eating dairy products and therefore challenge my immune system through the molecular mimicry that would result in an autoimmune disease. Off the table. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to get an autoimmune disease, but if I get one, it will be triggered by some environmental toxin I can't see coming, or it'll be triggered by my genetic code that I'll have a flaw in the code and it will cause that. Okay? You won't see me saying, "Oh my God, if I eat this and that and the other, and I eat enough steamed kale, I won't get colon cancer." It's bullshit. Okay, people that eat perfect diets wind up with colon cancer. That colon cancer. There you go. In other words, you're going to wind up your lung cancer. Your lung cancer has absolutely nothing to do with your diet. We don't have any idea what the fundamental deep cause of that thing was.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you for saying that? Because Joel Furman just said it on the show that lung cancer, especially, has no link to diet. It's genetics and environment. And because people write me every day if I would just do a stricter version or a raw diet, but they don't, or more water fasting. I don't think they get it, Dr. Lisle.
No, no, and they don't get it in the same way that the entire genre has not understood this because none of them actually went down through the details of looking at the mortality statistics the way that I did. I'm the only person that I know that's done it. Okay. And so when you peel back one nonsensical concept after the next, you're going to wind up that it's really about this. Are you doing a good enough job that you're not doing something that's egregiously nasty enough to put enough pressure on one of those systems to actually increase your odds of trouble? Okay. So if I was eating, no, I don't know, French fries every night, from McDonald's, if that's the only thing that I was doing, it is very, very unlikely that the damage that would be done by that would put any systematic pressure on anything that would result in me losing a day of life. Very unlikely. Is it possible? Yeah. In other words, we can measure that I'm causing, free radical formation. In other words, I'm making it a little beehive of more likely to be trouble. But based on everything else I do, nah, it's absolutely probably within the body's ability to detoxify any of that. You know, if there was 100,000 Dougs and 50,000 of them did those French fries and 50,000 of them did not, then we might find that the statistical average of the 50,000 that didn't do the French fries might outlive the ones that did the French fries by an average of 3 days. Okay. That would be a surprise to me, actually, if that were true, but but it is possible. So it's possible that daily French fries might cost me as much as 72 hours of life. Okay. I guarantee you they don't cost 30 days of life. There's no way in hell that's true. Okay. So I know the data enough to know that that is not possible. What if I were to eat a big greasy pastrami sandwich with cheese all over it? I do everything else that I do except that I add every day at lunch. I had my oatmeal in the morning, and then by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I went and beat a big greasy white bread pastrami sandwich with cheese leaking all over it. It's just disgusting to even think about it. But let's suppose I did. Okay. And then at nighttime, I had, I don't know, steamed vegetables, a salad, etc. I had some healthy food. What would that cost me? Not much. Okay, so that that is starting to statistically increase the likelihood of vascular pathology. That vascular pathology would not arrive as soon as it would be for Frank Sinatra or my dad, so it wouldn't be taking me out 3.5 years early. Not with everything else that I was doing right, but might take me out 6 months early. So that's a possibility. What about cancer? The odds of the increase of cancer, statistical likelihood of that would probably be on the order of about 1%. In other words, it would probably take my general statistical odds of dying of cancer up from about 10% to about 11%. So that would be about 1%. The cost of cancer is about 10 years of life. So 1% of 10 years of life is about 1.2 months. So the probably the statistical cost of me eating a big fat juicy pastrami sandwich every day would probably be about 1.2 months to cancer and something probably similar with respect to cardiovascular disease. So probably somewhere in the order of a couple of months. Like, okay. So hopefully people are getting kind of, in other words, you can't follow my math because I live inside the math and all you can do is sort of trust me on this. But this math is accurate. So now we start looking at, okay, well, Doug, what if you eat two shitty meals a day? Okay. Now it's bacon and eggs and then a pastrami sandwich, and then at night you eat something healthy. Okay. Now you're starting to get to the level where the amount of assault on the organ systems is now starting to have a little avalanche-like effect. With just one pastrami sandwich and two other healthy meals, we were within the thresholds of the body to do an awful lot of housekeeping around that dirty, pig pen. Okay. So we got two nice kids and then we got pig pen in our house, but we got a cleaning crew that comes in and pretty well every day cleans up pig pen pretty well. But at the end of the day, we wind up with maybe a 60-day price in terms of earlier onset of pathology, etc. So, but now what if we have two pig pens and one good kid? Now what do we got? Well, we already know what happens with three pig pens, and that's 3.5 years. So what if we have two pig pens and one decent kid? It's probably a couple years. Okay, so that's probably what we're looking at. The so now we can sit back and actually have some notion of how crappy it is to, have your French fries that you bake in your oven or whatever it is, and then you put some salt on them or dip them in ketchup. It's like, oh, dip you having a ketchup with sugar, Doug? Yo, that's a processed thing. That's not a good thing to do. It's like you've got to be kidding me. That process is unbelievably benign. I already told you that eating a big greasy pastrami sandwich as one of my three meals is probably only going to cost me two months, maybe three. So, what on earth could dipping some baked fries in ketchup possibly do? And the answer is nothing. Nothing. There's going to be no price. Okay. What about salting it up? Probably no price at all, except that now we start to look at individual differences. What's the extent of your vascular pathology of the damage you've already done? What's the deal with your blood pressure? How much damage did you already do to your kidneys before you became a vegan at 58? Like just how much damage was already done to the existing system? Okay. And then what does it do to your blood pressure if you start to eat a bunch of sodium? It's like these are important things. And so this is where a place like True North, is this ultimate place of pristine eating. People come in there sometimes with very serious pathologies. I've seen people go in there that were effectively, a week away from dialysis. And so now it's like, if you go on a standard McDougall diet, it's not going to cut it because you can't handle a 1,500 or 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day if you are down to 38% of your kidney. But you can handle the very modest and natural amount of sodium that's sitting inside a whole natural food down at a zero extra sodium diet at True North, and you may live for many, many years. In fact, a hugely long time on that diet, never having to go to dialysis. Fantastic. Okay, so there's nothing in the world. I'm not disparaging our awareness that we would understand that there would be a place where we could, it's kind of like if you've got severe osteoporosis, don't go on a roller coaster for God's sakes. Okay, in other words, so let's be careful about our limitations. But for somebody like myself, going to a vegan restaurant and they have some really good burger that AJ keeps touting this burger in Auburn.
No, that one is in Fair Oaks. We're talking about Sunflower Drive-In.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to go to this thing before she leaves town, and she's gonna show me the how I've been missing out. Classic. I've lived this narrow life where I never get to do anything, and then AJ goes and does a bunch of fun stuff, and then it clues me in just in time before she leaves town, so to better my existence.
That's what I'm hoping. That's what
That's
I'm hoping.
exactly right.
Do you
So
know that I hate to interrupt, but yesterday we waited 90 minutes for our food. That's how popular it is.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right, well, I'm going. So, but the point is that if we did a sodium analysis of that food's not SOS free. It's not pure. But what is it? It's a foodstuffs that, given my biology, is in no way a challenge to my biology, is no way self-destructive to my biology, and in no way is that level of a challenge something that, oh no, I would never want to put my kidney through that because that I'm saving my kidney to theoretically be something that makes sure that I get to 97. It's like I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. That isn't reality. The Me eating the sodium in that fantastic burger that I'm going to eat, it better not be a Beyond Burger. Let me tell you what, I've never eaten one of those things, and I never will.
It's a nut burger
Uh,
made out of walnuts, cashews, pecans, flax seeds, spices. There's no fakeness in it. It's a true veggie burger.
Fantastic. I love that. Okay, so any rate, the point is that I'm not even the slightest bit worried about SOS anything. That includes the oil, by the way, everybody. In other words, the I'm not interested in eating a bunch of fried food. Anybody that's ever been around me knows that if I think something's fried, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to eat the greasy shit. I don't like greasy anything. It bothers me. The but if there's olive oil in somebody's pasta sauce, It doesn't bother me in the slightest. Okay. There's no reason for me to believe that eating anything like that is in any way going to be deleterious to my health in any measurable fashion whatsoever. So my job, my mother always told me from the time I was a little kid, she said, um, my sister was a much more fastidious student. She was like had a bigger conscientiousness about this. But she said, Doug's always happy getting the lowest A in the class. And absolutely, I've always felt that way. I was terrified. I think after I left UC San Diego, I can't remember. I think they then instituted, plus and minus. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I got the hell out of there before they had plus or minus. Like that would have been a disaster for me. My plan was always aiming at the lowest A in the class. Okay, that was the entire scheme. I never messed it up, people. I got A's all the way through. I never messed it up. I had a few close calls, and but I managed like Houdini to pull it out, etc. But I remember when I became a professor, I was like, "Oh, thank God we have pluses and minuses." You know what I mean? It was so pleasant to have plus and minuses because God, that way you're not just hacking it up into these, four buckets. You've got all these other buckets, and kids can get more deserving. So, as a professor, it was great. As a student, it was hell. And so, I was really glad that I lived my whole life under, lowest A in the class. It's the same as the highest A. And that is basically the truth with health. So, the lowest A in the class here is absolutely, we already know that a C work gets you to basically 2 years statistically likelihood within 2 years of your otherwise life expectancy. So we know damn well that between a mediocre Joe Blow idiot, okay, that does what? Oatmeal and pastrami sandwiches, that dude is has a life expectancy, all things being equal to mine, of 98% of my life expectancy or 97. In other words, that guy's within 2 or 3%. Outrageous. How the hell is that guy, get off? Well, the answer is the genetic code. Genetic code just spins straw into gold. That's what it does. Okay. All you have to do is to just not egregiously mess it up. Now you can look around the universe and you can see that people are egregiously messing it up. They manage to not pay that big a price in terms of their life expectancies, but they're waddling around way overweight, they're wheezing, they're having trouble, they're in bad shape. Okay. So most people 60 years old in this country are in kind of so-so shape because they're 50 pounds overweight, and they're not just 50 pounds overweight, they're 50 pounds overweight, you know, on gluttonous fare that's also done a bunch of vascular damage, et cetera, et cetera. So they've got the genesis of multidimensional, fairly substantial pathologies that will define their existence over the next 20 years of their life. Okay. However, we don't need to be there. Just get a low A. Okay. So the idea here that's why my, for a long time, it's all been about the McDougall starches. Okay. It's all been about, I don't care. I tell people, I don't care what treats you eat. I don't care what you're getting into. All I care about is your diet based around the big McDougall starches? That's really all you need to be thinking about. If you're, and I've said, if if you're looking at your meal and you don't see a big pile of wet starch staring back at you, you're lost. Okay, you don't know what you're doing. That's what needs to be staring back at you. If it's not staring back at you, God knows I don't know what the hell it is that you're eating, but whatever it is, you're displacing what ought to be there with something else and that something else is mediocre by comparison. Okay. So I don't really care what's around the edges. I don't care how much kale you eat or cranberries or anything else. Like none of this makes any difference. What makes a difference is, are you systematically doing something that is very self-destructive? Okay. And if the majority of those calories are essentially the McDougall starches, then you are not. Okay. You don't need to optimize squat. What you need to do is you need to pull away the things that cause pathology. You will not stop the microbiological processes of aging that take place no matter what the hell it is that you eat because they're not subject to nutrition. So the sort of fantasy is that somehow if you provide all these fantastic nutrient concentrations to the system, that somehow miraculously it winds up doing a better job at making the copying machine work. That is not true. That is not how it works. Okay. People, we all have abundant evidence of this. All we have to do is stare at the longevity of your cat, the longevity of, I don't know, Leo the lion, um, the longevity of everybody that you've ever seen and ever watched an individual age. Okay. The people, the vegans, no matter how long or how well they live, they show it. Okay. They do. The genetic code goes about its processes. Okay. So, I mean, you get to see in some of these really, really fine examples of really healthy livers, you get to see how much function they maintain and how good they can, look effectively. In other words, they don't hasten the process. So I can remember giving that lecture, the Pleasure Trap lecture at the TEDx place. That was in about 2012, so it was about 14 years ago. So I would have been about 52. And on the stage with me was Neil Barnard. And I don't remember exactly, I don't know how old Neil is, but Neil was, at some point, I think I knew Neil when he was, 64 or something. And I remember thinking that son of a bitch is in really great condition. Like that is not normal. That guy is in really unusually good condition. It's like, yeah, he deserves it. Okay. But then you look, 7 or 8 years later, and it's like, okay, now it's starting to show up. Like, yeah, I have no doubt that that guy is in phenomenal internal biological condition. But Neil Barnard no longer looks like a young kid, and when he was 60, he freaking did. Okay, and that's because why? Because it doesn't matter how, and it goes with Alan too. Okay, it doesn't matter how brilliantly you execute basically a perfect strategy. The truth is, all you get is an A. Okay, that's what you get. You don't get A plus, you're not there's no special sauce on the A plus. They're not going to tack on an extra 2 years of existence, and they're not going to roll back 3 years of what it happens to your appearance and your deterioration. Not happening. Okay. All you get to do is you get to make sure that you don't contribute to excessive deterioration that happens early. Okay. You will not be causing excessive deterioration early by having a diet that gets you a low A. So that is the story of, if there was any indication that that were not true. Okay, so if you had, I don't know, somebody could concoct a theory behind this, i.e., hypernutritional theory, and they could try it out and try it out with about your rats. Okay, let's find out what happens. And guess what we're going to find? We're going to look at the telomeres and we're going to see how long these things can reproduce. And we're going to find out that it's all built around a genetic clock. Now, another thing that I hear, by the way, oh, the telomeres, if you eat really healthy and blah, blah, and have a bunch of kale, then the telomeres lengthen or whatever. It's like, no, they don't. They don't shrink faster they don't shrink as fast as they will if you eat foods that are causing pathology. There's a hell of a difference between not doing damage and doing something that basically goes against the nature of biology. So it's useful for you to know. Take, if for those that enjoy the process of super pristine living and believe, whether they believe it or not, if they think and feel like they feel better behind living an extraordinarily pristine existence, I would never try to talk you out of that. In other words, I understand what that feels like. I've done it. Okay, so I understand what that can feel like inside your mouth, what you can feel like on your teeth. In other words, what it can feel like when you wake up in the morning. I understand that there are subtle individual variations that take place that you can be aware of. Okay. And if those are worth it to you, then I am not here to dissuade you or poo-poo that at all. But the amount of fear that I have listened to in my career over people that are doing any step short of that, thinking that they are sabotaging their health, and also worse yet, thinking that their families are basically on a train wreck to Armageddon because they're conventional eaters. It's like they are not on a train wreck to Armageddon. They are going to live 98% of the lifespan that they would live statistically if they did everything as perfectly as could be drawn up in a book. Okay. So it's all about everybody freaking chill out, is what this is about. Do a good job. Stare down your McDougall starches and make sure that you absorb those things. Have an apple now and then. Get yourself, some nice diverse nutrition. What did I just do today? I bought some new organic bananas and some new nectarines because they're finally getting into season. And I'm telling you, those nectarines smell fantastic. I haven't had a nectarine in, a year. Okay, so am I looking forward to it? Yes. Here's what I'm not looking forward to. Oh my goodness, I get some specific set of nectarine, antioxidants that are gonna come in there and make me healthier. They'll make me no healthier than any other natural plant food that I could be eating. And I don't even consider that when I make my food choices.
Okay, Dr. Lisle, we have so many questions about this in the chat and that were sent in, and I hope you'll be able to answer some of them. So
Sure.
when you said healthy livers, I thought you meant healthy livers, but you mean healthy, that's what I heard. You mean people that live healthfully. Okay,
Yes, that.
but that's what I heard. So one of the things I think people miss is how important genetics is. There's a
Yes.
saying in our community, genetics loads the gun and lifestyle and diet pull the trigger.
Yeah.
I've met with so many geneticists now at Stanford, and they're saying that that's just not true across the board for all diseases.
Yeah. I would say that it's interesting. I had a um, interesting conversations that I had, in the last 20, 25 years with Colin Campbell and Caldwell Esselstyn. And Esselstyn expressed to me once what a relief it was that when he became convinced that this direction, plant strong way of living, was extremely important and useful. And then he was going to try to demonstrate it to himself, clinically and empirically. He said, basically, thank goodness I picked vascular disease because had I picked cancer, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. Okay. So in other words, so that's an example of what you're saying. In other words, the the vascular disease is a great example where vascular disease is very pathological. In other words, you have to go to a lot of trouble to get yourself vascular disease. You don't know what you're doing. You're just freaking eating hot dogs and hamburgers and French fries and chocolate shakes and beer. But you're not smoking cigarettes, so you're really not aware that that dietary pattern is going to be, is going to engender vascular disease. But Caldwell knew that that was true. And so as a result, when he went to do his research, he was able to demonstrate the reversals of that if people get their act together. Now, um, so in that case, I don't know, genetics loads the gun and diet lifestyle pull the trigger. Well, the truth of the matter is most people will wind up with vascular disease if they eat shitty enough for long enough. It's just a matter of when it's finally, and they'll probably die of it. It's just a matter of when. Okay. So at that point, it's like, well, I'm not so sure we care that much about the genetic variation. The truth is, you're talking about overburdening human genetics qua humans. This is not a carnivore. So if a carnivore, this is an omnivore, and it's an omnivore that can only handle so much animal food and so much shitty plant food at the same time. By the way, we don't actually know very well if you had really good plant food and decent animal food at the same time, just how destructive the animal food would be with respect to vascular disease. I question that it would be that destructive. I think it would be substantially less destructive than what it is that we see. Okay, so I think that the vegans and the vegan doctors beating of the drum about the dangers of the animal food are potentially substantially oversold because the research that's involved involves the juxtaposition of the animal food, which is also shitty animal food, along with shitty plant food on the other side of the people's diets. Okay. So you're getting a double dose of not only you're not getting all the natural fibers and antioxidants that are supposed to be in all the other plant food that you're supposed to be eating, and then you're also getting basically hyper, you know, hyper fat and then fried up animal food. In other words, you're getting really problematic animal food and nothing to protect you. Okay. So anyway, but so often with so much of this stuff, for example, with cancer, the the so much of cancer is sort of random chances, and certainly the probably the two biggest sort of smoking guns are going to be smoking and lung cancer, certainly, and then the other one is going to be really nasty cured meats and colon disease. Okay, so digestive diseases, stomach cancer, things like that. So if you're eating a bunch of whatever that stuff is, smoked meats and stuff like that, it's like, okay, you're increasing your odds. It's not very likely that you'll die of one of those cancers, but you're just a hell of a lot more likely to die of those cancers than if you don't eat that stuff. Um, but to give you a feel for that, it's like maybe you've got a 1 out of 100 chance of dying of colon cancer. If you eat all this processed shitty meat your whole life, liver worst, knock worst, everything else worst, and the worst of the worst, now you got a 2% chance. It's like, oh, I see. I go from a 1 out of 100 chance of dying of colon cancer to a 2% chance of dying of colon cancer if I eat absolute trash my whole life. It's like, yes, that's correct. Okay. So that that's a way for you to understand this. You do everything perfectly, your odds are about 1 out of 10 that you're going to wind up with a very serious cancer. If you do everything conventionally, you're going to probably have 13 or 14% chance. In other words, a little bit more. And then if you smoke, then you got like a 26% chance. In other words, smoking is by far the biggest, and it's all on lung cancer. So if you're not more likely to get pancreatic cancer if you're a smoker than if you're not a smoker. You're not much, I mean, people will get all excited about it. Oh, yes, it is. There's a 26 greater chance. It's only a 1 chance in 100 that you're going to get a pancreas cancer. So it's a 1.26% chance if you're also a cigarette smoker. It's a very, very small increase in risk. So basically, anyway, what can I tell you? Don't smoke. Don't do egregiously stupid things. Eat, I have to say, as I remember reading this, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, whenever this book came out, The Omnivore's Dilemma. And the Michael Pollan's Summa of diet, after looking at the whole question, and he said, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. 7 words. Okay. I think it was eat food. In other words, don't eat a bunch of processed shit. Okay, eat something that looks like it resembles something that human beings would have gotten off their farm. Okay, so eat food, um, mostly plants, not too much. Done. Okay, and it's like, guess what? Not bad advice, particularly for what was probably an honest man really trying to make sense of all this data. I remember looking at it like, wow, you need to read Colin Campbell. There's some things you apparently don't know very well. But 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 when we step back, are we trying to talk about, you know, how much risk are we talking about mitigating? At what level, et cetera? What are the odds? The answer is his prescription is not that bad. If you do the Michael Pollan prescription, you are getting an A. Okay. I mean that is a low A in this class. You know, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. That is that's very close to A work. I think you can do better. You know what I mean? I think it's easy enough to do better. I think you move it over to almost exclusively plants. Okay. The or close. I think that's better. But I think what he is prescribing is actually a Doug Lisle A.
Doug Lisle. Great. I love that. Thank you. So we have Bettina on Instagram who says, but Dr. Lisle, can't we reverse many of the bad pathologies that we have created with diet?
You'd have to go through them pathology by pathology. Okay, so the it depends upon what you're looking at. You're not going to reverse type 1 diabetes through, vegan diet. Okay, so the there's going to be autoimmune diseases. You're not going to reverse those. Okay, so there's going to be many things you're not going to reverse. There's going to be all kinds of cancers you're not going to reverse. The are there going to be what's the biggest thing that you're going to wind up reversing? Biggest thing you're going to wind up reversing is when an existing dietary pattern is continuing to put pressure on an organ system that's under a pathological situation. Okay, so vascular disease, that's going to be the big one. Okay, not too far from there would also be kidney disease. You know what I mean? You're overwhelming the kidney through, um, you just got a diet that's far too rich, that's got too much sodium in it, etc. You can you can be kind of dealing with the just far too much protein byproducts from the digestion of too much animal protein. You can be burdening systems. But yeah, this it's a good question that she asked, but you would have to actually go through this and say, what pathology do you mean? And we'd have to look and see whether or not that pathology could be reversed or slowed, etc. Good idea to eat healthy food, but it's not magic. Okay. Good question.
Yeah.
You would
So
have to come up with a specific pathology for us to answer that question.
right, because I think that when I've been doing these shows for a long time, and you're
Yeah.
one of the regular guests, and the three other regular guests, one is Dr. Goldhammer, and one is Dr. Brooke Goldner, who's a medical doctor, and Dr. Ron Weiss, who's a medical doctor. And almost all the questions that come in are, I have this disease, and it's a particular disease, and if I eat your way, will it reverse it?
Yeah.
That's really all people want to hear, is that this is, like you say, some magic. And I don't think they realize that genetics still plays a part, because if I understand you correctly, people with like stellar genetics, like Dr. John Scharfenberg, can maybe like he's not even vegan, Dr. Lisle.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that he's just lived within the capacities and he had an extremely stable genetic structure. God, I forget about him. He's like a hero. Like that guy's what is he? Is he 102 now?
He's 102 and a half. He's always been vegetarian, that's true. And he
Yeah.
doesn't eat an egregious amount of animal products, but he does eat dairy. He does eat eggs, from my understanding.
Ah, interesting.
I don't think he avoids oil or salt for that.
Right.
Now one of the things he credits is that he only eats 2 meals a day. He does not eat dinner.
Right. So I mean that's not crediting anything. That just means that's how he's got himself classically conditioned to that. The But what that guy has is that he simply has what we have, folks, is you're the most complex machine in the universe. And in the most complex machines, what there are is there's machines within the machines. Okay. So you're like the biggest Ford Motor Company plant you ever saw, where they literally have a set of machines that's just there for the little things that you put on the top of the tires, you know what I mean, to seal, the little caps for the air. It's like, think about this thing that is half the state of Michigan, and it's just one machine after the next inside huge thing. Well, that's your body. And so a guy like Sharpenberg, his machines, there's just no bad machine in there. It's like unbelievable. Like in all of us, we've got some machine that, when they passed out those machines, we got kind of a B version of it. Okay, so I don't know what my B version is of the machine. B version, that doesn't sound too bad. But the point is that you don't get, a guy like this guy basically got an entire suite of the 100 most important machines. He got an A list in every one of them. Like that's really rare. But I was going to tell you what's amazing about him is that he's not only 102, it's worth living at 102. That guy is the best conditioned 102-year-old human being, 100-year-old being I've ever seen. Like I wouldn't mind a bit being 102 years old and being in the condition that guy's in. Okay. But that guy he is a 1 in 100,000 shot. The reasons for his success are genetic. Okay. So he did not do anything that put excess pressure on any system. He didn't eat too many eggs. He didn't burden the system with too much animal protein. Whatever amount that he had was well within the capacities of the system to deal with it. In other words, he's a Michael Pollan uh, omnivore. And he's done, i.e., what does he eat? Eats food, mostly plants, not too much. That's what he did.
He does credit the midlife exercise he did. He thought that was very important as well.
Yeah, in other words, I think, but if we looked at him, it wasn't about trying to be superhuman with exercise. It was just moderately intelligent, normal exercise for the species. And that's right on target.
Right. Well, thank you. I never want to disparage any doctor or anybody in the plant-based world, but this, and I'm not going to say the name, but you probably know who I'm thinking, but Vi is saying, well, what about the recommendations of Dr. So-and-so? Is
Dr.
this
Schmo, who
Dr.
says what?
Schmo? Is this unnecessary? I think you know who I mean, like the
Well, whatever Dr. Schmo thinks that you need to be eating a bunch of stuff to get a bunch of fancy nutrients in there in order to save your ass, that doctor does not know the facts of reality. Okay. So I have investigated every single claim on that anybody's twisted my arm about, and we keep finding exactly the same things. The doctors that believe in those things continue to fall for the same trap over and over again. It is it's a statistical trap, and it's called a lack of it, what they do is they do not ever look at the cross validation of a sample. That means that when you run a fishing expedition on trying to see correlation coefficients between, oh, I don't know, breast cancer in Marin County and the wine that people drank. Uh-oh, it looks like wine was really bad because those people had higher incidences. It's like that is a useless finding. And if you have any training in science, you know that finding is useless. Okay. How could you make that finding useful? Go pull a second body of data out of Alaska and find out if you find exactly the same correlation coefficient. If you find it twice, then you've got something really interesting. They never find it twice. these doctors will continue to report single sample correlation coefficients. That's all they ever do. Okay. The reason why you will never find it twice is because it's not true. Okay. Because it's not true, it will show up once in any data sample. You know, people that do this research for a living know that this is false. And in fact, this drove Colin Campbell batshit crazy because there was a researcher at Cornell in the Institute of Nutrition at Cornell that he was famous because he published and published and published and published. And it was endless quantities of exactly this kind of research. He was always getting his stuff in Good Housekeeping magazine, front of the New York Times. This guy was just, I don't know his name. He was just an absolute self-promotion machine. And he literally it was trivial research to do. Okay, I could do it in my sleep. It would take me less than an hour a day to generate one exciting finding out of the next. Oh, rhubarb has been shown by the people that live in Eastern, Maryland, that, the database shows that there's a 27% reduction of, pancreatic cancer. Oh my God, we all ought to be eating rhubarb. It's like, that is a useless finding. Did you find it when you then took a database out of Scotland? Did you find it there? No, you didn't. Okay. So, by the nature of statistics, the things are considered statistically significant if they happen at the level of 1 out of 20 by chance. Well, if you measure 200 things, you're going to find 10 things that show up statistically significant by chance alone. Okay. You can't help it. That's where the statistical numbers show up. In other words, if there's a 1 in 20 chance we're going to call that fancy, then if we measure 200 things, we're going to find 10 things. If we find those 10 things, the odds are all 10 of them are bogus and they have no relationship to reality at all. Okay. This is why you and I went down this road a number of years ago with the whole phenomenon of nuts.
Okay.
I explained that one of our doctors who's so excited about nuts and their relationship to vascular disease, I explained to you for 2 or 3 years before this, I said, AJ, there is no relationship between nut consumption and anything to do with vascular disease. And you said, yes, but everybody's bugging me like crazy because this doctor keeps promoting this. I said, he is a fool. It is not true. And then you and I spent an hour as I walked through the logic of this and we recorded it. Okay, did not mean to embarrass this doctor, but the point is enough stupidity is enough. Okay. And anyway, the point is there is no relationship between nut consumption and vascular disease. What did this doctor observe? Some database had found a correlation coefficient. Okay. The doctor had apparently not bothered to look, but another large database had checked the very logic and found out in another database of over 200,000 people that there was no such relationship. So once you know that a second database has not found it, then you know for a fact that your original observation is a mirage. Because if it was true, it would certainly be found twice. Okay? You wouldn't find it once and then not find it and then say, well, how do you know which is the truth? If you find it once and you don't find a second time, it means that it is not true. Period. End of subject. Okay? If it is truth, it will always be found in a large database consistently. So to not know that, that is called cross-validation of a sample. Once you find a finding, you must cross-validate it with a new database to see if it exists. Okay? Anyway, whoever's asking this question about Dr. Schmo and thinking that some nutrient in some whole plant food needs to be hyper concentrated in order for you to reduce your odds of some kind of a pathological condition, BS, 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 BS. Okay. I got up to here with that BS 25 years ago, and that's why I wrote an article for Health Science Magazine called Looking for Health in All the Wrong Places. And then I made that a major chapter in the pleasure trap. If you are looking for some kind of concentrated super chemical that's going to be the reversal reversal chemist magic chemical that's going to reverse a pathological process and help you recover your health, you are looking for health in all the wrong places. Okay? So this is, unfortunate, wouldn't it be lovely if in fact nature worked that way? It would indeed be lovely. It is a beautiful, fanciful concept. It is what drove the natural foods industry. It gave rise to Whole Foods Market. It gave rise to the Rodale Press. Fortunes are made in the vitamin pill industry. It's all about deficiency, nutrition, get enough of this nutrient, the magic chemical that's going to save you, whether it's, God knows, B complex, pantothenic acid, you know what I mean? Calcium, magnesium supplementation, blah, 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 blah. There's no end to it.
It,
Okay. All of it is conceptually wrong.
so Dr. Lisle, just because you don't see the chat like I do, and I pulled up the video that you did. It was 6 years ago, and boy,
Yeah.
you were a lot younger. I just
Yeah,
noticed.
that's much.
You look so much younger. But because people are saying, well, Dr. Esselstyn says for heart health, no nuts, and Gregor and Furman say we must eat nuts. Dr. Lisle unpacked this in a video. I put the link to it 6 years ago called The Evidence on Nuts. So I would ask for you to watch that. One interesting thing is I've eaten so many meals with Dr. Scharfenberg, and he never touches his greens. He hates kale. So
there you go. You know what I mean? Oh,
and
I
he
hate
still
kale.
made it to 102. So what can I tell you?
Yeah, I hate kale. I don't eat kale.
Yeah, I don't like it either, and that's why I changed my signature from Love and Kale. I thought so. So, Dr. Lau, how attractive a person is. Would you say that's also genetic?
Yes, totally.
So
Absolutely.
I thank you for saying that because one of the things that bugs me a lot, and again, I don't want to say names, it's just that people believe it. So a lot of influencers, people with large audiences on YouTube and Instagram, especially when as they get older, will say the reason I look this good is because I follow this diet, and then they'll bring people on that have been following Diet X for many years and say this is why she looks so good, and that's not true because people I know people that follow that diet. I'm not going to say names that way that aren't that attractive, and but people believe it.
Well, that's kind of I guess the truth of the matter is that when you understand uh, I've had somebody say to me that I wreck it with science. So in other words, I'm not too interested in fantasy and what all the exciting things about how things could be. I leave that to J.K. Rowling. You know what I mean? That people like that to me are fascinating and imaginative and super interesting, and I think she's incredible. Okay, so but don't ask an owl, what you ought to be eating, for God's sakes. Okay, so the there's no magic here. There's no there's no another bogus thing, AJ, is connection, psychological connection, so important. Marriage is important, people live longer, blah blah blah. This is 100% BS, all of it. Oh, isolation, this is difficult on people. It causes cortisol rises and therefore contributes to inflammatory conditions that result in them, deteriorating. No, 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 no. All BS, 100%. Okay. There is no psychogenic process that's involved in any of this. You are a machine. Every single one of your cells is a very, very complicated machine. A very small part of that machine is your central nervous system. It's a tiny little part of it. It's your brain. And your brain has feelings, okay? And those feelings tell you where to move towards things and how to move away from other things. But the integrity of the machine that keeps you alive has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on inside your head, okay? So there's no psychodynamic process by which you can think yourself healthier, and there's no psychodynamic process how it is that you can think yourself sick. And no social process has a damn thing to do with it. This is all 100% BS. You are a machine. That machine has certain requirements. If you do things that you adulterate the machine by damaging it with really, really bad fuel, you can actually cost it a little bit of its life expectancy. Not very much. Okay, so you can't. It's very hard to screw it up. But you can screw it up to the tune of 3 or 4% of its life expectancy if you just do a terrible job. Okay. But there's nothing that you can do to make it go beyond its innate capacities. It cannot be done because the limitations will be inside the genetic code itself. It'll be in how pristinely the architecture can stand up to the processes of the forces of entropy that actually deteriorate the integration of systems. Okay, so everything that human beings have built, 10,000 years from now will be in the sand. Okay, so sooner or later, the forces of entropy are going to take them down. So the Empire State Building, it's not going to be here in 10,000 years. Something's going to happen. Some lightning's going to strike that thing, or some earthquake's going to topple it. Whatever. Something's going to happen. Okay, but for now, it's here and it functions and it's fine, and that's us. Okay, so we're like the Empire State Building. So but there's nothing we can do to sort of stop the forces of entropy in how your life is built. So do a good job, do well, get an A. It's damn straight worth getting an A as far as I'm concerned. But that's just my opinion. The truth is there's other people that are like, there's no way in hell I'm gonna bother to get an A. It's like the difference between an A and a C minus is 3 years. Hey, bring on the pizza and the frickin' beer. Like, I can't argue with that. The and I will tell people that if your family and friends and loved ones, if that's their attitude, for God's sakes, get out of their way. It's like their perspective is totally rational. Okay, so those are not unreasonable inferences. They are their own personal choices and evaluations. Okay, and they can change them. They can be like, wait a second, now I'm getting too fat, too sick, and I'm wheezing. What's that thing that Esselstyn guy you said again? Maybe I ought to take a look at that. Well, maybe they will take a look at it. Okay, but and they might change their mind then. But yeah, I'm not really in the business of trying to sell anybody on how important it is to do this in any certain way. I want people to have informed consent about, hey, this is kind of what it takes to do a pretty damn good job of this and not be egregiously self-destructive. That seems very, very reasonable to me. Okay. And this is what I think are the basic, most important parameters. And that's all. We don't have to worry about all these other thousands of little details or worried about anything that remotely resembles perfection on anything. Okay. Our animal forebears, it was just all about doing it half-ass right. Hope you survive. Okay. That's what all animals all over the earth are doing. To just do a half-ass pretty good job of being a tiger. The rest of it is up to fate. And so we remarkably have the opportunity to most of us live within, 95% of what our up or our potential lifespan could have possibly have been. And that's great. And I wouldn't want to throw that away by being self-indulgent. But self-indulgent is a hell of a long ways from what it is that I do. I'm out here making sure I'm getting the lowest A in the class, at least. And that's all I'm after.
So, one of the viewers is saying, not everybody likes what you're saying. I'm just going to be honest. Most of them do, but
Sure.
some people get a little triggered, and people are saying, because we're not saying any doctor specifically, we're not trying. See, I knew this
No.
would happen, but basically, they'd like to see you debate Dr. Brooke Goldner because she cures people every day with nutrition.
Well, she cures people with nutrition that have a specific nutrition caused pathology. Okay. So if you happen to have a pathology that is greatly exacerbated by really shitty nutrition, and we change the nutrition and get it within the body's capacity, basically, we unburden the detoxification system so that the thing can heal itself. That's all that she could possibly do. There isn't anything else that can be done. Okay. So I don't know what she thinks she's doing with her nutrition that's fixing anything, but I guarantee you, I will take any doctor, hers or anybody else's, and we'll take it mano a mano against water fasting. Okay. Water fasting, I'm not adding any nutrition. I'm not putting any nutrition in the system. Where's the nutrition that's needed to do that thing that any doctor thinks that the nutrition is healing anything? I will take on that doctor and that pathology, and we'll stick, they can take their people and they can take them and feed them at True North, and I'll water fast them. And we'll find out what happens at the end of that. Okay. And I can tell you, I already know what happens. Okay, we know that the problem is that people have, if you can fix something with a dietary process where you improve the diet, then that means that that was very, very likely a pathology that was caused by dietary excesses and imbalances. And so the healing process is the process of essentially the reestablishment of homeostasis by detoxifying the system. Okay. And the most rapid method for detoxifying the system is not healthy nutrition. It is water fasting. Okay, so yeah, so anybody that ever wants to debate me on that, like don't debate me, debate the master. Take on Goldhammer. Anybody wants to take their evidence in the teeth of Alan and find out what Alan has to say about that, Alan's not going to contradict me on that at all. Okay, nobody has evidence like Alan. So that's the philosophical premise. So a healthier diet is simply a diet that is going to reduce the load, the toxic load on the system, and make it more possible for the person to get well. If you take a John McDougall's diet, he had excellent results on the reduction of high blood pressure, but they're not in the same class with a water fast. Okay, so so that's how that goes. So there's no reason for anybody to be thinking about any debate with any specific doctor. If that doctor thinks that there's magic elixir inside what it is that they are serving, that there's some process by which that elixir is healing some pathology, very interesting hypothesis. And if anybody thinks that's true, you've got one hell of a burden of proof to try to prove that. And you would have to prove that in the teeth of a control condition that would use water fasting for that very same pathology. And I'm pretty sure you're going to fail.
I didn't even
Okay.
want to say this because I love Dr. Brooke Goldner, and she has
Yeah.
a show. She uses something called hypernourishment with green smoothies and a half a cup of flax seeds. And
There
um,
you go. Okay, try whatever pathology thing she's fixing. You can eat that if you want, if you've got that pathology, but I'm going to give you my best advice right now. If you have some pathology that you think that she can help you fix by hypernutrition processes, you need to be talking to Alan Goldhammer at True North and see what he says about that pathology and how it responds under water fasting. Okay. So am I going to say that make a blanket statement that there might not be something that might not work the way I think? I can't make that statement. All I can say is I've never seen anything like that. Okay. That's how, yeah,
what?
that's how it's not even logical. Okay, quite frankly, the processes of pathology that are going to respond to anything nutritionally are almost all, I mean, occasionally could there be a deficiency like at a B12 or something? Sure. Okay. But you don't need some fancy smoothie for that. It's a highly specific chemical and there's a highly specific, unusual deprivation, a deficiency process. But the other than that, that whole idea is looking for health in the wrong place.
Right. Well, she is, I love her. If she's watching this, please don't get mad at me.
No, no, it's fine.
I want
And
people
you
to,
know what? I wouldn't want people to be putting words in her mouth and to be overgeneralizing what it is that she believes to be true. Okay. I'm just responding to what it is that I'm hearing. But, all I'm telling you is if you think you've got some hypernutrition that solves the problem, if you're making that inference as a physician or anybody else that's treating like that, you are making an inference that requires, in order for you to validate that inference, it requires you to run a mono test against water fasting. Okay, because you have an entirely different alternative hypothesis than the one that's being inferred there. And I think the water fasting hypothesis, i.e., that most of those pathological conditions are going to be best served by the essentially the facilitation of the detoxification process, not by trying to push some fancy chemical into the system that therefore then facilitates a healing response. That makes no sense whatsoever to me.
Well,
Okay.
her fans are saying she hacks the inflammatory pathways by replacing omega 6s with omega 3s, and that water fasting doesn't do that. And
Okay, that's fine. If she thinks she's doing that, that's what that's beautiful. If someone thinks they've actually got that, uh, I'll believe it when I see it with my own eyes on the scientific publication where we've got actually appropriate control conditions. Okay, then I'll believe it. But right now, what I hear is an interesting theory that contradicts what I believe to be true about biology.
I think she might have published research. I'll look for it. She
No
reversed.
matter whether it's published research, it's whether or not it's any good.
Okay.
Lots of people have published research. Okay. The question is, do you have an appropriate control condition that actually allows us to make an inference for the superiority of that procedure over something that is an appropriate control? And the answer is, I doubt like hell she has anything that looks like that.
All right.
Okay. All kinds of people with a keto diet or anything else that basically improves somebody's diet over what the diet they ate before. And then they see improvements. They say, see, look, our keto diet works. We put in some cod liver oil and some chopped salmon. Okay. It's like, no, what you did was you improved the diet over the diet that was there before. It's not the cod liver oil and the chopped salmon. It's resulting from the improvement that you're seeing. It's a detoxification system that basically unwound a pathology in spite of the fact that you put that in there. Big difference. Okay. Oh, no, you can't say that. Look at my fancy stuff that I put in. It's like, oh, yes, I can say it because I'll take it all away, all of it. Okay. And we're going to find out that I have a more aggressive and more substantial healing response by giving the person nothing. At which point, now your inference that the fancy thing that you put in there and hypernutriented the person, that now as an inference crashes on the rocks off this cliff. Okay, so that's how I'm going to look at that.
Okay. I'm just going to say, in case you're
No
watching,
problem.
she helps a lot of people. And I love her. And
You know what? Anybody that directs people towards healthier diets is helping people. But careful about the inferences you make about why it's working.
okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's asking what you think of Brian Johnson. He's the guy that's trying to live a long time or forever. Are you familiar with him?
I've heard of this guy, so people have talked to me about this. Yeah, whatever it is, it's all going to fail. Okay, so this is all a joke. The this is not the way that the human being works and the way that life works. You're not going to extend this thing. This thing has a process by which it goes through. And I don't know, I forget all the things this guy does. I can't remember.
Just
Lives
like he has a very thriving social media presence, and he shows what he eats, and it's very particular, and how much he's interesting to watch.
Sure. Interesting. And I'm sure he's got a social media presence and it's all very interesting. Yeah, all the wackadoodles that have spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how it is that they're going to extend their existence. This is a total waste of time, other than it might make you really popular and make you some money. Okay. But it's certainly not showing us anything fancy about how it is that we're going to cheat the entropic processes of human aging.
Yeah.
It's an exercise in silliness.
So we also have, because I'm doing two things at once, talking to you and reading the chat. When you started talking about nuts and the half a cup of flax seeds in the smoothies, people are saying, well, you can't eat them without gaining weight. That's the other big thing.
You know, this is all of these discussions, whether it's the wackadoodle that's trying to live forever, ever, or a doctor that's trying to use hypernutrition because they think that this is going to be the key to solving some pathology. Where are we? Okay, it's all looking for health in the wrong places. So this is what all of these kinds of discussions led me towards a deep dive into the actual mathematics of reality. And so that's why I have arrived at the conclusions that I've come to. And quite frankly, nobody can point to any evidence anywhere that contradicts these conclusions. Okay, this is what you see. This is an animal. It's 80 plus or minus 10. Okay. And the most of that variance is going to be chalked up to individual variation in genetics. The rest of it is going to be chalked up to the reductions, not the optimization, the reductions that you will subtract off of the time that you will have as a result of pathological conditions that arise from a various assortment of environmental insults on the integrity of your cellular machinery. That is going to be cigarette smoking. It could be environmental toxins of various kinds. The biggest toxic load, other than cigarette smoking, is likely to come from your diet. Okay, so those are going to be the things. People are going to talk about exercise, but exercise is going to be almost an entirely non-factor. It's almost zero in this equation, people. It's very close to zero. Okay, so people are going to talk about sleep, exercise, diet, etc. It's like whatever. What's it really going to come down to? The things that you can put your eyeballs on, the most important thing you're going to put your eyeballs on is going to be what you eat. Hopefully you're smart enough to not be smoking cigarettes. So after that, it's going to be what? It's going to be what you eat. Okay. And what is it that you ought to be eating? Don't eat a massive load of toxic shit. That's the problem. Okay. After you get rid of that problem, because you build this diet around the big McDougall starches, once you do that, how much variance is left? I can already tell you there's almost no variance left. So I already know that all of the king's horses and all the king's men, looking at all of the other variables, are all adding up to days here. Okay. We can already see that this is true. So that's why my point is get an A. And after that, I wouldn't worry about it at all.
Okay, so I've got to ask you this question because there's something in the chat that pertains to this other person's question that she sent
Sure.
in. If I understand you, because I'm going to have to watch this again because there's a lot of really important nuggets of things you said, is that we all have a genetic potential and we
Yes.
can't really outlive it. Now, there are certain things that we can do to maybe die sooner, like
Yes.
for example. However, I have to tell you that I mean I had well, these were not genetic relatives. So this was
Yes.
the wife of my uncle, who was Swiss, and her mother. They smoked like chimneys. They lived a very, very long time, and they ate rich French food.
Yes.
They didn't eat processed food. I will say this.
Yeah.
They did not eat, they ate bread, but they didn't eat processed food. Everything was made from scratch, but
Yeah.
it was rich because I lived with them growing up. And May, that was my aunt's mother, died she was never overweight. She smoked like a chimney. Winston's,
Yeah.
she died in her 90s quietly in her sleep. And
Right.
my aunt, whose name was Ramon, she did eventually get bladder cancer, no lung cancer, nothing
Yeah.
like that. And she died at about 86, not,
Yeah.
and so these were anomalies. But in general, my understanding is that we can do things that can make us sicker quicker, but that even with this perfect diet that a lot of people are preaching, whether it's the raw diet or the SOS free diet, it's not going to give us 10, 20, 30 years.
No, no, no. You're getting this conceptually right, AJ. In other words, you this is as high as it goes for a given individual. In a given genetic code, that might be 77, it might be 97, it might be 107. But typically what it's going to be is it's going to be about, 87 for a female and 84 for a male. Okay, so that's about what a very standard, it's just a bunch of playing cards. Okay, you got 25,000 playing cards called the genetic code, and you got 25,000 playing cards. That's what you got. And in those playing cards, like, I'm hoping mine says 95, okay? But the truth is it probably says 87. Okay, so my guess is that that's a pretty good guess that that's probably what that looks like for me. Now, that means that if that's what's in the cards, it means I'm not living to 87 in 2 days. It's not going to happen. There'll be no lengthening this existence by 2 days. It will be 87, and that will be that. Okay? If that's what's in the cards. Now, all the kinds of little shitty things that I've done are going to have little tiny reductions. So I know I'm already under 87. Okay, I've done enough little damage to things, a little bit here, a little bit there. So it's probably down to, oh, I don't know, 86 and a half. Okay, so now it's 86 and a half because of the wear and tear that's been done. There's no way for me to get this to 88. There's no way to get it to 89. It cannot be done. It's against the laws of physics. Okay. All that I can do is to keep it at 86 and a half right now. That's the best I could possibly do. So the question would be, how bad could I screw it up? And the answer is, well, if I started smoking right now for the next 20 years, um, I could probably take a year off of it. Okay, I might be able to take 2 or 3 years off of it. Probably not. I could probably cause myself a vascular crisis by 83 or 84 if I started smoking cigarettes and eating cheeseburgers right now. But I wouldn't have it wouldn't go down in the next 10 years. Okay, so it would take longer than that for that pathology to eventually manifest. So I can start subtracting time if I was extremely aggressive. Okay, I could probably pull 3 or 4 years off of that thing. All right, well, what if I did an okay job and I didn't smoke? What then? The answer is, okay, well, if I did a shitty enough job in the next 10 years and really tried to work at eating really mediocre, maybe I could pull a couple of years off of it. That's probably about as bad as I could possibly do. Okay. So I might wind up at 84 and a half. So essentially, all of the action is between the 86 and a half that's in the cards now if I did everything perfect versus 84 and a half if I do everything pretty much wrong. Okay. Other than smoking, I could probably cost myself maybe another year or two. Okay. So the action is all in those 720 days. So now it's all about, okay, well, what does that look like? And the answer is you got to do a pretty shitty job to do significant damage, to do 2 years worth of damage. Okay. It's not going to be easy to do. That's the kind of level of damage that you do in a lifetime through a so-so diet. Okay. So for me to pull off to get 2 years worth of damage done in the next 20, not an easy thing to do. I'd have to do a really lousy job. Okay. So now what's it mean? It means that what's left between me and perfection versus short of perfection is probably less than 90 days. So me on an absolute chopsticks eating organic kale in the morning and meditating at sunrise and getting up to a gong or something and walking around barefoot like a Shaolin priest and doing everything perfect under the sun, that's like 86 in 5 months. You know what I mean? That's like, okay, you got almost every inch out of the 86 years and 6 months that's left in the code. Okay. All right. What if I do a really shitty job? Answer, probably 86 years and 2 months. There's probably 90 days difference between me doing a mediocre job and me doing a stellar job. That is probably the amount of variance that's in there. When you look at the scientific evidence, there's just no other way to look at those numbers. Okay. There is no place where the people live barefoot and eat greens, and it turns out that they're living to 90. Not true. Okay. You're just not going to find that. You see that the human, its natural genetical structures have limits to them, and we can see what those limits are. Okay. So that's why it's useful. I mean, I've had so many people, they're so worried and so upset about their children. Okay, like, oh my God, my children, my grandchildren, it's driving me crazy because my daughter-in-law is feeding them shit. And it's like, what are you thinking? So I have to cross-examine them, and they're literally in fear of those little young people's lives. And it's like, check a life expectancy chart on your 9-year-old granddaughter. Like, you need to check it. Just look it up. What are the odds that my granddaughter, how long is she going to live? Okay, look at it. It's like, oh, well, I don't know. Right now, it's only 79 because she might die of an auto accident or something bizarre. But what if she lives to 50? Okay. She's not going to die of some pathological condition that could have been avoided between now and 50. Oh, yes, could have been cancer. No, she's not going to give herself a lethal cancer between now and 50. That's not going to be in the genetic code by virtue of secondary reaction to a diet. That's going to be in the genes to take her out that early. Nothing's going to stop that. Okay. So now we're going to say, okay, what if she lives to 50? Then what? Oh, if she lives to 50, then we get rid of all those huge possible losses of a freak accident. Now she's going to live to 85. It's like, oh, okay. So look at that granddaughter who's a 9-year old and realize that human being almost likely is going to live to 85 years old. Okay. What if she lived perfect and did everything you said? Oh, well, in that case, she'll live to 88 and a half. Okay. So you got to wrap your head around that and realize perfect, a little perfect fanatic that does everything that you say, statistically likelihood goes to 88 and a half. If she does everything wrong and eats pizza at every birthday party and eats conventionally her whole damn life, it's 85. Okay? You got to wrap your head around that. That's what's on the table. And so it's important. No reason to have all this anxiety. Your job is to educate such people, give them a decent example, let them know that there's some juice in that game that's worth looking at. But otherwise, there's no reason for us to be so intense and worried about getting every micron of a antioxidant in every mouthful of your diet because this is all an exercise in silliness.
Um, Thank you for saying that. A lot of people are asking, well, what about the blue zones and what about the Adventist health study that show that vegans live longer?
Well, you have to look at the facts. Okay, the big effect size in the Seventh-day Adventist study is all about smoking. That's what the big effect size is. Okay, if you get rid of that part of the effect size, we're down to 3.5 years. What we're looking at. So this is, I mean, just look, the Adventists aren't showing that a bunch of Adventist vegans are walking around at 92. There's no database that looks like that for people. Okay, that is not true. Okay, so they are simply people that are not subtracting 2 or 3 years off of their life expectancies. Okay, the way that the average person is. So it's important, to understand we're talking about 80 plus or minus 10. You got to get that in your head. And obviously, believe me, I wrote The Pleasure Trap. Okay, I absolutely believe in healthful living. Okay, but I also believe in calibrating, we need to have some reasonable calibration as to understand what the stakes are. The and it has been my observation in this space for 50 years that people are out of touch with that calibration pretty badly. Okay, they are superstitious and they are fanciful about the variances in food and how impactful those are at some tiny, very micro level.
And I don't know if this is relevant. The Adventists don't drink alcohol, other blue zones do.
Yeah, truth is the blue zones all look, it all looks about the same, i.e. 80, 85, et cetera. And that's what it looks like. Yeah, anytime anybody eats reasonably healthfully, that they're a blue zone person. Then the blue zones that we color all this stuff about connection and blah blah, all this other bullshit that they put in there that has absolutely no relevance whatsoever and no empirical support. Okay. So what is a blue zone? It's just a human being that does Michael Pollan's eating. That's a blue zone. That is what it is, i.e., eat food, i.e., the blue zones are relatively sort of quasi-primitive and more agrarian, so they're eating food that is less processed. Okay, mostly plants, not too much. Done. That's the blue zone.
One of the things that have gotten many people upset in the plant-based community is that four of our beloved plant-based, well, three were doctors and one wasn't, but icons in the plant-based world, Dr. Hans Deal, who was a devout Adventist, Dr. John McDougall, who we all knew and loved. We also love Dr. Deal, Dr.
Yes.
John Robbins. All
Yes.
three of these gentlemen died at 77, and then Dr. Baxter Montgomery in his, I believe, early 60s. And that caused a big ruckus because,
Yeah.
and then of course, my lung cancer didn't help.
Yeah. Yes. I.e., 80 plus or minus 10. So the we have we're trying. I guess I'll go to my grave. You know, Melissa, my longtime life partner, she'll hear me rant and rave every now and then she'll say, she'll say, Doug, people can't do math the way you can, and she'll just say they can't do the math, and she can't do the math very well. I'll try to break things down and explain it to her. So I I understand that I'm going to go to my grave and people will not have a facility for the mathematics. The a good friend of mine, after listening to me for years, he said, he summarized it in this way, that um, if you don't know stats, you don't know shit, and people don't know stats. Okay. You have to know the statistics to actually understand the underlying causal structure of reality. Statistics was invented in the late 1800s and in the early 1900s. There were geniuses that were responsible for the development of modern statistics. Okay. But statistics is actually pretty complicated. And so very few people that discuss science really have a facility for statistics. And so, unfortunately, and as Larry says, if you don't know stats, you don't know shit, and people don't know stats. Okay. This discussion for 2 hours today is not meant to be belligerent to anybody. Anybody that's in this space, as far as I'm concerned, is a team member that's trying to pull people in the right direction. This is the direction that I believe in, and I think it's very useful for people to know. But there is fanciful, intimidation, fear, hope. There is all kinds of superstitious nonsense that pervades this field. Uh, and it's because people don't know the stats. Okay. So I do know the stats, and the stats summarize themselves quite well to Pollan's 7 words. And so that's what I would have you direct your attention to.
Eat food, mostly plants, not too much.
Yeah.
Cheryl is saying, but Dr. Lisle and Dr. Goldner are both going to be at the plant-powered party. I don't think they're going to hit each other.
No,
Dr.
no, I don't think so. I'm not. I'm not the. Hey, listen. Like I said, if you put somebody on, that's why all these doctors a lot of times have very different views because all of their programs work because they're all in the right direction. Okay, they will make incorrect inferences as to why it works. That's fine. But their baseline inference is going to be pretty good because it's going to be taking people in a healthier direction with respect to their food. So I'm not going to contradict that people have seen good results. I'm just going to contradict about why they saw those good results. Big difference.
Right. I understand that. And Dr.
Yes.
Lisle will be speaking Friday, Dr. Goldner on Saturday. And you guys may not know this until now that Dr. Lisle was recently just added as the final speaker. So we'll hope you get a ticket before the price goes up. So I just want to, if there's time, I want to end on one more point because
Sure.
one of the reasons I want to do this is mainly because, most of the people are very happy that I've relaxed my diet. Most,
Uh-huh.
um,
Yeah.
and they're just like, because they feel, some of them feel that I've given them permission to do it because I've basically been teaching the world the gospel according to Goldhammer for 15 years.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize, it's not because I might be a hyper conscientious nutcase to you, but I'm not a health nut, Dr. Lisle. I was doing it because it worked beautifully for weight loss.
Yes.
The reason, and people may not, I've never been like, don't put a banana and blueberry in your smoothie. I never listened to that or believe that. It's just, it works really well. And so this question we have from Barb is really important because I've always said, and you know this from day one, do the least restrictive program that you can do that will give you the results you seek.
Yes.
And Barb says, with all this discussion about the downside of perfectionism, I'm wondering if it's still okay for me to aim for an SOS free and left of the red line lifestyle after years of following it on and off. When I try to relax my approach and include some salt, sugar, or more calorie dense foods, It often starts fine, but then spirals out of control for me. Is a small amount of added salt and sugar actually less healthy than strict SOS free eating? And how can I include it without losing control?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and it's really the ultimate question that everybody needs to essentially find their own way on this one. Okay, so the there are people that may have goals um, that it may require them to toe a line that's extremely narrow. Okay, that could be true. Um, I can remember uh, AJ, who was an unbelievable high conscientious student of this whole area. And I remember for years thinking, she just doesn't have to live that tight to the line. Okay, so the I knew she didn't need to live that tight to the line, but she didn't necessarily believe that because it was such a godsend to solve the weight problem that you've given somebody the Holy Grail and they're not going to freaking give it up. And so it was reasonable for AJ to be thinking the way she was thinking and to be worried about it. Okay. Pleasure trap is anybody that's ever sniffed anything remotely similar to an addictive process, could recognize that potentially in food and recognize that they could be susceptible to that, etc. Now, I haven't. The truth is that I've lived in Alan's house and been super strict for weeks at a time. But I've also lived most of my life since my early 20s, for 45 years, I've lived as a McDougal eater. Okay. So the screws have not been that tight. And it's not like I've careened between junk eating shit and then back to true blue and then somehow fight my way to the middle. No, the truth is that in other words, I basically have a baseline that sits around a McDougall style diet, and that's where it sits. Okay, and if I eat a little richer and it gets a little much, I don't even feel that good. So then it's purely the internal governor that draws my decision making. It is nothing else. Okay, so I think many people are that way. There are going to be some people that are built a little bit differently when it comes to their reactivity to food and the stakes that are on the table for them, possibly with respect to weight or something else. And so they may need to approach this, they may need to approach SOS as, the way a drug addict would approach drugs. It is a possible, but that is a rare individual. I mean, I'm not going to say rare. I'm going to say relatively uncommon individual difference variable that is going to be embedded in certain people's personalities. The Most people are not going to do that. Most people need to get this generally right to where your digestive system feels good, that your joints feel good. We're not inflaming a bunch of stuff by eating a bunch of shitty food. In other words, that you just feel good and things are working well for you. That's where we need to be. We don't need to be worried about anything else. But there are going to be individuals that may not be able to live in that kind of a space. And if it turns out that that's you, then more power to you if you have the self-discipline to walk the tight line that you need to. If you need to, you need to. And that's it's not the easiest line to walk, but it's doable. I've done it, so I know. But for me, ultimately that gets fragile because my mind ultimately says, what am I doing? Do I need to really be doing this? And the truth is that my internal check says, no, no, I don't. Okay, so that's an individual thing.
Yeah. But I think one thing that a lot of people don't know, and this was the one thing that I think if you rewrote the pleasure trap, you would include or expand on this concept of the ego trap, episode
Yes.
161 of Beat Your Genes, that for
Yes.
some people, if they set the bar too high, it's an automatic fail. And this is where it's nuanced and it's not a one size fits all, everybody.
Yes. Beautifully said, AJ. I'm glad you remember that because I never know what episode it was. But the the ego trap, i.e., setting the bar too high, can be a substantial cause of a lot of failure. And so that's why I have pushed against that the concept of this perfectionistic model for a long time. I've wanted people to basically have the idea of, hey, get an A. You know what I mean? An A is good enough, and that will serve you extremely well. And that means sometimes you're going to get some B's on some quizzes. Okay. That was the whole story of the continuum of evil. That a lot of times, what do you do if you travel, Dr. Lisle? Answer, take a B. Okay. I'm not taking a D. I'm not eating a freaking cheese sandwich. That's not what's happening. Okay. But I will take some veggie sandwich. God, it's on white bread. Awful. Not happy about it. Okay. But but I'll take it. Okay, I'll take it and I'm not going to sweat it. It's not a big deal for me if I have to take a B now and then. If there's a Chipotle in the place, I'm going to get out of there with a B plus. It's going to be a little bit better. So still going to be way too salty. Trust me. I like healthy food. I'm really looking forward to AJ's place. Okay, so I like healthy food. I like healthy food that's a little bit doctored, i.e., McDougall level, better than anything. Okay. I can like really pristine food too. If I'm hungry enough, I will eat just straight steamed vegetables. And if they're good, it's like, man, that is really good. But you asked me for my favorite meal. It's the steamed vegetable plate with the tofu at that has been braised tofu, i.e., it's been oiled up a little bit. Okay, it's not greasy and shitty, but it's got oil in it, and it's the tofu along with the salad, the tahini salad dressing, which is lovely and light and nice, and the brown rice, and the steamed vegetables with I think a little tiny bit of tahini sauce on those vegetables. That's what they have
East
at
West Cafe,
East
but I
West
thought you
Cafe.
got it as a wrap. I get it as a wrap.
No, I don't get it as a wrap.
Ah,
A wrap, I don't know, eating that big wrap like that. That wrap's like huge. I don't know what I get intimidated by that wrap, and then it's a messy and it falls apart. No, I get it on the plate.
yeah, that's good to know. Well, I had lunch today at Nectar Cafe in Auburn, Kathy Fisher, who's visiting me to say goodbye. And we're just eating the food and everybody's saying this is so good. You know why? Because it has salt in it. I mean, it really does make food taste better. I'm sorry. And you don't need a lot actually, but
No. No, I don't like it. I dislike it. It goes over a threshold, and it's like, no, and I'm not happy. But you have a lot of whole match like at the what do you call it, East West Cafe. It's a bunch of steamed vegetables on there. They're totally clean. Okay, the rice is totally clean. It's not boiled in some kind of sauce. So now we have effectively just a little bit of oil in there and a little bit of whatever it is in that tahini sauce, and it's like marvelous. Okay. That is a marvelous treat for me. That is not acceptable at True North, but I'm not somebody of severe pathology that's trying to save my life at True North. It's like I'm a functioning organism that doesn't have to worry about getting a 93 on the exam. That's the idea.
if the people can't do it, they can't do it, like
Yeah.
Jenny's saying. But does this striving for perfectionism I'm just can make people crazy, I think, sometimes.
It's just unnecessary stress. And that if I'm not down on it in principle, I'm down on it, you thinking that it's a prescription. That's a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Lisle, I'm sorry that we went so long. You're doing like what Dr. McDougall did. I mean, we could go 2 more hours and have a Doug-a-thon, but I appreciate you explaining this. And guys, people really need to listen because they hear little pieces and they disagree. Well, you wrote The Pleasure Trap. He's not bashing anyone or if what you're doing works. He's basically looking at it through the lens of science and statistics, and that's what he's talking about. You're not going to live any longer than your genetic potential, at least not too much.
None at all. You
Yeah.
will only live up to your genetic potential, and our job is to subtract as little of that as is reasonable.
Right.
Do
Because
a good
Dr.
job.
Lisle, ever since I stopped being SOS free a year ago, I don't know if I'm healthier, but I'm a lot happier. And I don't want my last meal to be steamed kale.
Very good. All good, AJ. All
Thank you,
right.
Dr. Lisle. And we're so happy. Dr. Lisle is coming to the Plant Powered Party, and what he's going to be talking about is what the producer, I'm just the host, Dr. Mr. Benji Kurtz, who's done premier events before the pandemic on plant-based conferences. his favorite Dr. Lisle lecture is called Getting Along Without Going Along, and everyone loves this lecture. He gives it every time there's a McDougall program, and this lecture isn't even about really, statistics or anything, though he could do it. It's really about the question is like, well, how do I do this in the real world? Because my husband won't eat like this. My friends, it's one of the best lectures you'll ever hear, and he's speaking on Friday, so get your ticket now. Thank you so much, Dr. Lisle. This was really amazing.
Fantastic. I'll see you soon,
Take
AJ.
care, everybody. Oh, please come back on Wednesday for Dr. Alan Goldhammer, who's not going to agree with anything we just said right now, probably at 9 a.m. Pacific time for his show, which is called Hammer